Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to the January 13th meeting of the Select Board. Please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Happy New Year. This meeting is being recorded and broadcast on our local cable access television. We are also hybrid, so we have people that can join us by Zoom. And we would ask that they would give their name and address for our minutes. And if somebody is on Zoom and they have a question and they want to raise their hand in the Q&A, please give us your name, address, and your question, and Sean will notify me, and we will look at the question. Just going to ask the Select Board members to introduce themselves to ensure we have a quorum.
My name is Mark Lamb.
I'm Dottie Fulgenetti.
I'm Craig Barger.
And do we have Jamie on?
He declined being panel, so he might not be able to talk.
Okay, so he's not. So we do have a quorum with three of us. Select Board member Stebbins and Stacy are not here tonight. So with that, we are going to go right into our first item on the agenda, timed at 6:00 p.m. And this is an adjudicatory public hearing. The first one is for Southeastern Corp. Doing business as Sonny's Convenience. And Craig, if you want to read the...
Sure. The Select Board of Easton, as licensing authorities, will hold a public hearing in the Colleen A. Corona Boardroom, Easton Town Offices, 136 Elm Street, Easton, Mass., on Monday, January 13th, 2025, at 6 p.m. for Southeastern Corp. Doing business as Sonny's Convenience at 750 Washington Street, Unit 3, Easton, Mass., to show cause why the package store all alcohol Section 15 license should not be modified, suspended, or revoked for violation of Mass General Laws, Chapter 138, Section 34, sale, delivery, or furnishing alcohol beverages to persons under 21 years of age, and CMR 204-2.052, permitting an illegality on licensed premises, to wit, sale or delivery to persons less than 21 years of age.
Okay. So Jay, do you want to walk us through it? This is our attorney, Jay Tallerman.
Sure. So this is an annual event in Easton. It being a college town, the Select Board, since I've been working with you all, has done this on an annual basis with all due notice. And what generally happens, it's a sting operation. That sounds a little more fancy than it is. But what it is the police department engages underage operatives and makes the rounds of the establishments, both restaurants and package stores, with the underage operatives to see if they can purchase alcohol. And if they do, they end up here at these meetings for consideration under a long-standing set of policies by the Select Board, including a schedule for violations. What I do, each one of these hearings is kind of a little mini evidentiary hearing, or can be, like a little trial where I would call the police department and I would call the property owner or the manager of the restaurant. We'd go through a series of questions and answers. What we've developed over time is a process by which, if there's no real dispute that someone was served, an underage person was served, we ask the entity to sign a stipulation to that effect. And then that allows the Select Board to just have a conversation about what could be done to improve the situation there so that underage folks are not served. It's been really effective over time. It kind of reduces the tension, allows the Select Board to have those kind of serious conversations with folks so that we can get them on with their business while still getting the assurances that you need. In this instance, both the entities under Agenda Item 1 and Agenda Item 2 executed the stipulation, which I have for the record here. I'll give to Sean when we're done. For Sonny's Convenience, it was Neil Patel, and I think he's probably here if you want to just grab a seat over there or here.
You can come up and sit at the table. One thing I do want to add to what you're saying, Jay, that I think is really important for people to know, especially people watching this, is that when the underage operatives go into an establishment, they are not trying to trick the establishment They don't have a fake ID. It's basically they go in, they ask for alcohol, they get served, they pay, the money transaction happens, and then the police come in. So it's the fact that they weren't even asked for an ID.
Right.
And
And
they're underage.
And there are state guidelines that when towns do this and cities do this, that they follow, and the police department works with the underage operatives to make sure that they understand the guidelines. So it's fair. We provide advanced public notice around town that we are going to do these as well. So.
Okay, excellent. All right, hello, Mr. Patel.
Hello.
So do you want to talk to us about anything that happened specifically, or?
Yes, no, absolutely. So, no objection. We did have an employee that did serve during this instance. That employee of ours has been with my family, my father's stores, and now this one for over 26 years. This is a first-time infraction for him for selling underage alcoholic beverage. He did have one over 10 years ago for tobacco. Since then, so I can speak to the fact that he's very diligent in his work ethic. We do, since we've gotten our all alcohol license, which happened, I want to say back in 21, the end of 21, we've made some improvements in the business, and as of earlier part of 2024, we did replace our POS system, which has a built-in ID scanning software built into it. It's operated by a prompt that we select on the screen if we are requesting for an ID, which in my opinion isn't the best way to do it. So the previous system we had, for each item that was scanned into the system, the prompt auto-generated. If it knew that it was an alcoholic beverage or package that was being scanned, it would generate this prompt, and the newer system didn't have it set up that way. Since then, and since this infraction, I've reached out to our tech support and have had that figured out, so that now we have to go back into each of our SKU items throughout the store and add that prompt back in. And so we're working diligently to make sure that that doesn't happen again.
Okay. So when you came to get your liquor license before us, we were very clear that this is a college town
Yes.
and that we take noncompliance very seriously. We talked about that there are at least one, sometimes two compliance checks a year. They're posted in the paper. Make sure your people are trained. What we normally do for a first offense like this is we would issue a 3-day penalty, and if there was, if they were willing to put in a POS system like that, we would reduce it to 2 days. I would consider, because you have the system and that you are working on improving that, I would recommend a 2-day suspension. What does the rest of the board feel on that?
Mark?
I'm comfortable with the 2-day suspension.
Yeah, I think that it's appropriate for this time, this first time around.
No.
So are you closed on any days from selling alcohol? So 7 days a week?
We don't want to hurt you.
Right.
So I think that the idea behind that line of questions, what's your least busy day?
Monday, Tuesday.
Sean, do you have on the calendar, what day, amount of time frame do we have, Jay, refresh me, within 30 days to do it?
I mean, we've been flexible with people in the past on that, but we try and work within, not next week, so because they need some time to prepare, but we try and have in the past tried to get it done within 30 days.
All right. What does 3 weeks from now look like?
So we got January 27th and 28th, or February 3rd and 4th. Those would be.
Okay. Do you have a
Around that
preference
time
of
frame.
those 2 weeks?
Preference. We'll
All right.
accept.
Why don't we do February 3rd and 4th? All right, so you're going to get instructions. Please follow them carefully. You're going to have to put a sign on your door. There's things that you have to do aside from just not selling on those 2 days. The police do come and check to make sure that you've done those things, so make sure that you do those things.
And that'll all be detailed in the letter that you'll probably get from Sean.
Does it get emailed or mailed?
Yeah, I'll email it to you.
Okay.
All right, if there's no other questions,
Nope. No other questions.
okay.
Thank you, Mr. Patel.
Thank you.
Do we have to vote to close
Yeah.
that part of the hearing?
Yes.
So we'll need a motion and a second on the recommendation.
I move to suspend for 2 days, Sonny's convenience.
Second.
So that's Bodger, Lamb, all in favor? Unanimous. and vote to close that public hearing.
Vote to close, yeah.
I move to close that
Sec-
hearing.
Second.
That's Bodger and Lamb, all in favor? Unanimous. All right, for the next one, we have
Peter.
White Rose, can't find the name, I'm sorry. Go ahead,
White
Craig, if
Rose
you want to
Pantry.
read.
And I apologize if I brutalize the names. But, Select Board of Easton, as licensing authorities, will hold a public hearing in the Colleen A. Corona Boardroom, Easton Town Offices, 136 Elm Street, Easton, Mass. On Monday, January 13th, 2025, 6 p.m. for Mata Swan Papa Corporation, doing business as White Rose Pantry at 277 Turnpike Street, Easton, Mass. To show cause why the package store wine and malt Section 15 license should not be modified, suspended, or revoked for violation of Mass General Chapter 138, Section 34, sale, delivery, or furnishing alcohol beverages to persons under 21 years of age, and CMR 204-2.052, permitting an illegality on the license premises, to wit, sale or delivery to persons less than 21 years of age.
Thank you. Thank
evening.
you.
Thank you. Matthew Porter, I'm the attorney for Mahant Swami Bappa Corp. Along with me is Prashant Patel. Mr. Patel is the principal of Mahant Swami Bappa Corp., which does business as White Rose. Before the board is a signed stipulation, so certainly our client takes full responsibility for the underage sale that occurred that day. They have been in business since 2019 when they took over the business from the prior owner. They've had no violations on a town level, no violations on a state level. So certainly they take the sale of alcohol very responsibly. Unfortunately here, the clerk erred in his ways, not carding the individual. Since that point, they've gone through the process of having each and every one of their employees re-certified in TIPS training. They were also in the process of purchasing a scanning machine in place. And while the scanning machines are helpful, our client and all their employees understand that you need to ask for identification first in order for that to even be an asset to them. So they're using this as a learning lesson, particularly for a fairly new employee who was there and made a mistake. But as I said, stipulation signed, they take full responsibility. And I think with the new measures in place, they hope this will not occur again.
Okay. You know, we recognize that sometimes things happen, but it's an opportunity to make sure that your people are trained. I don't know if you do it on a certain time period, but everybody that comes in that's new really needs to know, card everybody, whether they look 70 or 80. Okay. Just card everybody. It makes it the easiest way to do that. The second group that goes before us on a hearing like tonight already knows everything we've talked about. We're a college town.
Sure.
Look for this to happen again at least once a year. And it's important that your people know that. We know that it hurts your business. We're not trying to do that, but we do have to follow through with consistency on things that, on this policy. So where you do have, you are going to be getting one of the card reading machines?
Yes, we in fact already ordered that, so.
Okay. I think that's a good step, making sure your people are trained. Like I said earlier, we normally do a 3-day, but waive the third day for somebody an organization that's getting a machine. And I'd recommend to the board that we give this a 2-day suspension.
I concur.
Questions, comments?
Agree.
Okay. Do you want to make a motion?
Right, so
Is there a particular
Yeah, if we
day?
could do the 26th and the 27th of this month.
So that's
January 26th is a Sunday.
And that's a day you're
27th.
normally open?
Yeah, they're open
Okay.
7 days a week
Okay.
with full alcohol sale. So be looking for January 26th and January 27th.
Okay.
Yes, please.
All right. So I move that we do a 2-day suspension, January 26th and 27th, for the White Rose Pantry.
Second.
So that's Bodger and Lamb, all in favor? Unanimous.
Thank you
All
for your
right,
time.
thank you. And again, look for the notices in the mail, read them carefully, make sure you understand them. The police will be following up to make sure that you are in the compliance on that day.
And then as far as the process is concerned, for drop the license off here, or do they just have to block off the sale of alcohol?
To the police department, and then you'll have to post
Okay,
notice.
drop the
And I'll
license.
give you the language so you know what to
Okay,
post.
perfect. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Great,
Thank you.
thank you.
I move to close the hearing.
Second.
That's Bodger and Lamb, all in favor? Unanimous. And I do want to say that this compliance check happens to every organization that has a liquor license in the town, and that's quite a bit. So I want to thank all of the organizations that passed their compliance. You know, we don't like to see any, but 2 out of the number that we have is good. We'd like to go. We're shooting for none the next time, so we hope people are watching this and paying attention. Thanks, Jay, for being here so much.
Thank you.
And I think we want to thank the chief for his folks doing a good job.
Yes. Thank you, Chief, and the operatives. We're just going to switch over.
Thank you, Jay. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you all, too.
Take care.
All right, so next on the agenda are our one-day liquor licenses. The first one is Langwater Farms Community Bonfire. If you want to come up. This is 215 Washington Street, Saturday, January 25th, 2025, 4 p.m. to 8 p.m. with a storm date of February 1st. So welcome.
Thanks for having me. Nice to see you guys all.
If you just want to say your name for the record.
Kevin O'Dwyer from Langwater Farm.
Okay, and tell us a little bit about the event.
Yeah, so we did the first one last year, just as a way to dispose of the Christmas trees and get a little joy in the dark of winter. And it was really popular. We had a great turnout. We had some great help from the police department providing a detail, and the fire department brought a truck down, and a couple of the guys were there, and it went really well. We had perfect conditions. It was a mild night. The wind was calm, and we're hoping for a similar night in a couple of weeks here.
Well, that's great.
So we've taken the same precautions. We have a police detail lined up for the road, and we've coordinated with Captain Green, the fire prevention officer, and alerted Chief Alexander. And we also will have a detail there as well with a truck and some water, and then we'll take some precautions too with some other water on the other end of the field.
Okay, terrific. And how do you'll be having food and?
We will, yes. Thanks, Dottie. We're going to be serving wood-fired pizza and doing some type of dessert, like a s'more-related dessert. Last year it was a s'more pizza, which was really delicious, but somewhat difficult to make. So we're going to amend that a little bit this year. But there'll be other baked treats there, and it should be just a really good night for the community. There was a great turnout last year. People had a blast.
Awesome. All right, any comments or questions?
No, you guys do such a great job that I know people that just flock to your place when this.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Craig.
Yeah.
I should add, if you want to see a preview of it, you can go back on YouTube. Last year, if you search on YouTube, Langwater Farm Bonfire, you'll see some drone footage of the event,
Oh, wow.
and which was really cool, and seeing the blaze from overhead.
Was that your drone that you used?
One of the guys that works for us has a drone, and he's great at flying it, likes doing it.
Awesome.
Excellent.
All right. Craig?
So I move to approve the one-day liquor license for Langwater Farms Community Bonfire at 215 Washington Street, Saturday, January 25th, 2025, 4 to 8 p.m., and a storm date of February 1.
Second.
So that's Bodger and Lamb. All in favor? Unanimous. Congratulations. Have a great event.
Great. Thanks very much. Maybe
All
I'll
right.
see
Thank
some of
you,
you guys
Kevin.
down there.
Kevin. Yep, sounds good.
All right, next, Shoveltown Brewery at Oaks Ames Memorial Hall, 3 Barrows Street. We've got 3 separate requests here. Come on up, Joan.
I am here to sing for my supper. Joan Lundgren, 20 Reynolds Street in Easton. These are 3 liquor licenses that will be used for Oaks Ames Memorial Hall on behalf of Shoveltown Brewery. So the first one is February the 14th, and that is called Disco Valentine. And we're having a group called Disco Dream. And that's an evening of music and food and fun and dancing. And that's the first one. Second one, as a committee member for the Tricentennial Committee, that is April the 26th of 2025. And that's a day of, we've called it arts and cultural. We'll have 40 to 45 artists on display. with food from local establishments, and we want Shoveltown to be there for beer and wine sales. The third one is on May 10th of this year, and that is World Premiere Band. Same format, band, food, dance, drink, good time.
And just my 2 cents, these bands are really good. They've played there before
Yeah.
to sold-out crowds.
Yes.
So if you want to go, make sure you get your tickets, even though the May 10th for world premiere. Definitely get your tickets early for those.
Yeah, and come on, find a Valentine or bring your Valentine for Valentine's Day. It's a good time. You can go on our site and get tickets.
So that's how, you want to tell people how to get tickets?
It's a shameless plug, and I'm happy to make it. Go to Oaks, OAKES, AmesHall.org, and get your tickets. It's going to be a lot of fun.
And is there food at these two?
Yes, there is food. Disco Valentine, we will do a dessert buffet that we're calling Love Bites. And for the April event, I'm going to use a lot of establishments in town, restaurants, supermarkets, and have food available. And that food will be free to the public. You'll have to purchase alcohol, but that's what we're doing with the Tricentennial, to kind of give you a taste of what's there in the area, and that'll be a really nice day. And then for world premiere, that will be heavy appetizers and desserts as well.
Okay. I just want to call out the food part of it, because all the other concerts that I've been to, the food is really good. Like,
Thank you. Unless you said all the other concerts you've been to, like at other places, was good. You didn't mean that, did you?
no, no,
Yeah.
not yours. All right. Any questions or comments from the board?
No, you cooking?
You
Thank
cook
you.
every time, don't you? Or almost every time? Yeah.
Every time. Yeah.
There's never a dull moment in this town, thanks to you guys.
Oh, thank you.
So I move to approve Shoveltown Brewery at Oaks Aim Memorial Hall, 3 Barrel Street, for Disco Dream Concert, February 14th from 7 p.m. to 12 a.m. The Arts and Cultural Festival, April 26, 2025, 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. World Premiere Concert, May 10th, 2025, from 7 p.m. to 12 a.m. for the Shoveltown Brewery, applied for the one-day liquor, beer and wine licensed liquor.
And police detail is not required.
Okay, please.
Second.
So that's Bodger and Lamb. All in favor? Unanimous. Excellent.
Thank you very
Good luck
much.
with the
Thank you,
events.
Joan.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Next, we have a bunch of Stonehill College basketball beer gardens at the Merker Gym, 320 Washington Street. January 23rd, 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. with a storm date of January 24th. January 24th, 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. with a storm date of January 25th. February 13th, 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. with a storm date of February 14th. February 15th, 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. with a storm date of February 16th. February 20th, 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. with a storm date of February 21st. And there is no police detail required for these either. These are all 6 to 10. So any comments, questions?
I move to approve the one-day beer and wine licenses as indicated in the minutes.
Second.
So that's Bodger and Lamb. All in favor? Unanimous. All right, great. Next, we have acceptance of a donation to the Easton Police Department. Chief, you want to come up?
Good evening, everyone. Keith Boone, Police Chief. So we got a donation, a very generous donation of $5,000 from Michael and Rose Fields, two Easton residents. And it's not uncommon that throughout the year we get donations, not that much. We do get some for $50, $100 throughout the year, and we have a donation account set up. So we want to publicly thank that family for that. He does have a business in town, Dr. Fields, Family Dental on Washington Street. So we're very appreciative of it, and we will deposit that in our donation account and use it for some things we have coming up throughout the year.
That's terrific.
Very generous.
Very nice when people show
Yeah.
their appreciation, and very generous of them. And I noticed the handwritten thank you note in the packet, which
Yeah.
is a very nice touch. So I'm sure they'll appreciate that as well. All right.
I move to accept the donation from the Fields family, $5,000 to the Easton Police Department to be put into the, what are we calling it, the police donation account.
Correct.
Second.
So that's Bodger and Lamb, all in favor? Unanimous. Terrific.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, and
Good
thank
to
you to
see
the Fields family.
Thank them very much for us. It's very generous.
All right. Next, we have contract award DPW 2025 to 10 Phoenix Communications for fiber optic cables.
Sure. I think Director Field is here for the sewer IMA, but can certainly fill in with any questions if there are any on this. There's a contract and a memo in the packet from the director. This is for the installation of fiber optic cable for the new public safety facilities that are going to be constructed at 321 Main Street and 524 Depot Street. This work involves approximately 37,000 feet of fiber optic cable and associated splicing. Funding for this comes from the $150 million debt exclusion appropriated for this project. We recommend award. The general contractor construction bids are due at the end of this month for this project, so there will be more to come.
Okay. So the contract value of this is $125,641.
That's correct.
All right. Any questions?
When does the work start?
On which, the fiber optic or
The fiber optic.
they've actually been out there doing some of the work ahead of time.
Okay, prepping the poles.
So we can't pay them until this is signed contract. But
Gotcha.
yes, they're starting to get it ready. They'll leave everything coiled up, ready to go into the buildings. When the buildings are up, they'll splice in the remaining work. So it'll be ongoing for a while.
So I'm just curious about the project. So it's obviously 321 Main Street, 524 Depot Street. Those are the buildings. But where does the fiber go?
So we have an existing fiber network now, and this installs from various splice points that are required to connect these buildings to our whole fiber network. So there'll be redundancy. It'll connect the town hall
Right.
to the new police station, to all the other town buildings we have.
So these things back end, correct me if I'm wrong, Dave, but not only to Town Hall, where we have a variety of servers here and some of the ECAT's equipment, also to existing Lothrop Street, where there's redundancy for our servers. It allows us to transmit things at a higher data transfer rate than we could do if we were doing it over internet. So I think it also back ends to ECAT on 50 Oliver. So there's quite a school campus. There's a decently large municipal fiber network we maintain.
And another technical, I'm just curious. I worked for a company years ago where we installed fiber networks all over the place. And back then there was like 8 strand, 16 strand. What is the strand count up to now these days?
I think we're at 72 right now. 72.
Okay. So there's plenty of fiber
So
for a
right,
long,
there's
long
plenty of
time.
connection,
Oh yeah,
connectivity, back and forth.
years to come.
Very glad that Dave is here because I would have no idea how to answer that question.
I'm good. Great.
Frank?
Thank you.
I move to award contract DPW 2025-10 to Phoenix Communication Incorporated, fiber optic cables, the amount of $125,641.
Second.
That's Bodger and Lamb, all in favor? Unanimous. Okay. Next, we have contract PCD, fiscal FY 2025-5, change order number 1 for Varica Construction for the Wheaton Farm barn construction.
Sure, thank you. Attached to the board's packet, there's a memo from Wayne Beitler, community planner, related to this ongoing barn restoration project funded with CPC funds. There is a change order needed for back guano remediation because that's, I would imagine, a health issue. So that needs to be removed and remediated, and the additional material will be necessary for the expense of the health and safety of the construction workers. So the change order is far below the threshold that the board typically would see for a contract, which, as a reminder, is things that are over $25,000. It's a $2,000 change order, but it is on a contract that you initially awarded, so that's why it's back in front of you. It would adjust the contract amount by that $2,010 up to $169,310, funded from existing CPA grants made at town meeting in 2014 and 2020. The Conservation Commission also has funds available if there's any contingency, and the completion date of this work remains April of this coming year.
Okay. Any questions?
No questions?
We've got to get rid of that bat guana, that's for sure.
Back when it was not good.
I
So
hope
I-
the bats are gone before the people are in there.
Well, I'll tell you, so when I was a kid, that's been a problem forever, because it's been kind of dilapidated. We used to ride our bikes by there, and if you were at dusk, you make sure you're going full speed, because the bats would swoop in on their way into the barn. Long, long time ago.
Formative memory.
It's just, yeah, it's a good memory.
Thank you for sharing that. You're full of all kinds of memories tonight.
So I move to award contract PCD FY 2025-5, change order number 1 for Rika Construction, Wheaton Farm Barn Construction, removal of additional bat guana in the amount of $2,010.
Second.
Bodger and Lamb, all in favor? Unanimous. All right. Next, vote for a conservation restriction at 55 and 59 Pond Street.
Sure. Environmental and Land Use Planner Jen Carlino is here for items 7 and 8. There's a memo in your packet already for item 7. This is a requested vote. The Select Board, I believe, to effectuate a conservation restriction on a piece of land that folks refer to often as the island. This is a piece of land that CPC has been working on for quite some time with the trustees of reservations. As you may know, if you use the property of a trustees, most of that is publicly accessible. There's a small amount of it that is private. This restriction is part of the multi-party deal between the trustees, the owner of the property, and the town to kind of make it pencil and make it work so that there's a conservation restriction here and it's publicly accessible. So once that's done, you will be able to access the Governor Ames estate not only from the Oliver Street side of folks, or there's a parking lot, but also from Pond Street, which is something that the public has wanted to see, CPC has wanted to see. So, I don't know, Jen, I'm not trying to put you on the spot. Is there a specific, there is a specific motion?
I have it, yeah.
Okay. The motion is in the packet.
It's just the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs. The Division of Conservation Services Office just wants clarification that it'll be the Conservation Commission that holds the conservation restriction, not the Select Board.
Is that standard on everything that we do anyway?
I think under modern practice
but
it
it
is.
just wasn't written that way in the town meeting article, and so they kicked it back to us for clarification.
Oh, okay.
And if you look at our GIS layer, there are some far older pieces of open space and land the town has purchased that are still technically owned by the select board. So I think customarily you would want Concom to
Yeah.
be the custodians of
Well,
conserved
correct.
land.
Yeah.
So there's a proposed motion in your packet.
So I move to confirm that the Conservation Commission is the holder of the conservation restriction for 55 and 59 Pond Street.
Second.
Bodger and Lamb, all in favor? Unanimous. All right, next, the Open Space and Recreation Plan status update.
You ready for me to share it, Jen?
No pressure, but we had chronic
Is it showing up
hybrid
on your
issues.
side?
There we go.
Okay, great, thanks. Hi, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
There's just one little thing here. Sorry, there's pop-ups coming up here.
Well, it's giving you subtitles in real time.
That's okay. Good for accessibility.
Good, okay. So thanks everyone for having me here tonight. We're just going to talk about the Open Space and Recreation Plan.
You're looking to advance the slide.
Looking at my notes. So open space means different things to different people, and so having a community discussion about open space is helpful for many reasons. Like you, I frequently use open space for a variety of reasons, like rock climbing and hiking, photography, rare species and local wildlife investigation. And we know how important open space is for all of us, particularly during COVID, for our physical, emotional, and mental well-being.
Jen, is it not formatting properly on your side? No, I'm sorry. I'm not trying to throw you off. Did you say your notes were not showing?
They're showing here.
Oh, good. They're not showing there. You're good.
Thanks, I'm trying to make sure they're not showing.
Yes, no, I have that fear constantly. I understand. A lifetime of
I
presentations.
had that happen once. It was not good. So I just want to make sure. Okay, enter. So in 1957, the Massachusetts legislature passed the Conservation Commission Act, which enabled towns to adopt a conservation commission for the promotion and development of natural resources and the protection of watershed resources. Commissions could conduct research into property and into our natural resource areas, but it also made the requirement for the Conservation Commission to come up with a conservation and passive outdoor recreation plan. It's basically the master plan for how we want our town to look.
Those were great pictures on there, by the way.
Oh, thank you. So when we hear the word open space, what do we think of? Anyone? I'll give you some pictures as a teaser. So it includes a variety of activities. So conservation land, forest land, active recreation land as well. Open space can be split into two categories: passive recreation and active recreation. The difference between passive and active recreation is a really important distinction. Passive recreation is the primary purpose for conservation property. Since the primary purpose of conservation commissions is for natural resource protection, conservation land's primary purpose is also that natural resource protection, with passive recreation coming in second. Passive recreation is an outdoor activity that occurs in a natural setting with minimal disturbance to the environment. It's just basically quiet enjoyment of property. Active recreation, on the other hand, are activities that might have more significant alteration of the property. It would become ball fields or playgrounds and parking areas. Passive recreation is usually done by a conservation commission. Active recreation is usually done by a recreation commission. And so now that we have a little background on what open space is, we can talk about the open space and recreation plan. This is a required document by the Division of Conservation Services that allows a town to be, or municipality, to be eligible for state and federal funding. It's extremely important for any type of open space project. In the last 3 years, from all grants, I've already obtained over $880,000. So having the open space plan is really important for getting funding. Open space plan is kind of like our master plan. It's what we want our community to look like, what natural resources we want to preserve, how we want to preserve our community character, how we would like to provide food, recreation areas, the water supply, how we would like wildlife to connect to other natural areas, as well as people connecting to those areas. The open space plan is a truly collaborative effort with all of our residents, hopefully providing comments. There are a lot of items that are required in the open space and recreation plan. There's an open space plan workbook that we have to go through. Typically, an update of this kind takes 2 years to do just an update. Other municipalities, a number of municipalities have hired outside consultants to do that work, but that is a range of $30,000 to $100,000. We've been doing this in-house for the past year, closing in on finishing. Mostly the time frame is because we have a park grant for Swift's Park, and the open space plan has to be completed and accepted before we receive that reimbursement funding. So we've been full steam ahead on the open space plan all this time. Just want to make sure I'm hitting the high points here. So the open space plan includes all of our assets, and so we're taking a look at our natural resource areas, Many people in the survey so far have listed their favorite places, and they include Wheaton Farm and Borderland, Sheep Pasture, Clifford Grant, Yardley Rink, Governor Ames Estate, Easton Country Club, the library, Flyaway Pond, Militia Field, Keach Field, and the community gardens.
The open space that you work on in the OSRP, though, is that just municipal open space, or is it also private as well?
We include all public and private land.
Oh, good.
As long as it is permanently protected. So someone like trustees, the Native Conservancy Trust and Natural Resources Trust of Easton all have a charter that requires their land remain in some conservation state and cannot be converted to another use. And so we do count those. Conservation restrictions, we would count as a private open space area because people maintain their property value, property ownership, but there's a restriction on it that says they cannot be developed.
Okay.
So we include both state land as well, borderland and Hockomock Swamp would be included in that. Those are things that had needed to be added to the most recent version of the open space plan. So it took a while to add about 200 parcels of land to do that.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah. So natural resource protection, clearly the aquifer is really important to the town of Easton and has been for a long time with Canoe River Aquifer Advisory Committee and the Water Department doing a significant amount of work to protect those resources. When we take a look at all of our plants and wildlife, there are different habitat areas that are uncommon in the state, and so those are areas that we would like to preserve here in town. Certified and potential vernal pools, there's a lot of rare species habitat, which means there's a plant or an animal that is on the Massachusetts endangered species list. It's pretty much our stewardship responsibility to ensure that they stay in town. Obviously, there's a balance between natural resource protection and development, but we think of our native wildlife, the same way people think about African wildlife, right? Our spotted turtle is our elephant in this area, this part of the world, so we want to make sure that we're protecting their habitat as well. Acidic peatlands, bogs, pine barrens, and riverine communities are also really important. It's not just about land purchases, but we're also looking at our communities, individual homeowners, being able to create backyard habitat, migration corridors for wildlife. So things like Homegrown National Park and the National Wildlife Federation's certified backyard wildlife habitat program are ways that we don't have to spend any money. Residents can take a look at their own property and manage it for wildlife habitat. And when we look at wildlife habitat connections, we're thinking about how animals can get from place to place safely. They're very much like us. We don't get all of our needs in one spot. We have to travel to get food and cover and shelter, and so do animals. So we want to make sure that they can get from place to place safely. We also have environmental challenges. Areas, invasive species are taking over a significant amount of our forest and our ponds. There's oil spills. There's compost that is placed in wetlands, erosion, undersized culverts also pose a risk to our wildlife and flood damage.
Can I ask a question about the invasive species? How do you respond to, what's the normal response to when you find invasive species? What do you do?
If it's a small enough section, we try to get in and remove it as soon as possible. If it's a larger area and it requires permits or requires volunteers to help remove that, we also try to pull those invasive plants out, but then also replant the area. So we just received a $20,000 grant through the Taunton River Watershed Association to remove invasive species from a portion of Old Pond, between Old Pond and Bay Circuit Trail. And so we have someone, a wetland consultant, who's preparing the permits and the plans for us to remove those plants and then replant them with native species that are better and more nutritious for our wildlife.
Great, thank you.
What sort of invasive species are there that are common in Easton?
We have a lot of Oriental bittersweet, buckthorn, there's Japanese barberry, Japanese knotweed. In the ponds, we have fanwort and milfoil. There's a whole host of invasive species. Garlic mustard is really prevalent around this property, but if you pick it, you can make a very nice pesto in the spring.
Okay.
Managing open spaces is something that also goes in the open space and recreation plan. We try to identify all the areas in town that need some sort of management and come up with a plan for the next 7 years. The open space plan is good for 7 years on how to address those issues, not just with conservation property, but also active recreation land.
Does it also identify funding sources for that type of maintenance?
Yes. In the action plan, which is pretty much the last section of the open space plan, there's a whole chart that we create. And it's what is the task, who might be responsible parties, where funding might come from. And then we try to break it up into, is it a short-term goal, long-term goal, ongoing? When do we think we might be able to tackle that sort of project? But all of our projects pretty much come up as funding becomes available and people are have time and willing to do it. So we try to parse them out that way, short-term, long-term. I'm not going to talk long about ecosystem restoration. Removing barriers to wildlife is something that's important, not just, mostly for these aquatic animals, but right now they can move up and down in the water column and they can move side to side within the river, but if there's a barrier like an undersized culvert where they aren't able to jump up into the culvert to get through the water, they're not really able to get up and downstream, and that is needed for genetic diversity. Open space plan lists all of the municipal open space as well as the state land and private land. There's a section in the open space plan where residents are asked, are there specific places where people would like to see preserved? The residents so far through the survey have listed mostly the agricultural lands that we would like to preserve. And we try to be very mindful about not listing a specific person's property. Maybe list it as Langwater Farm, not your property, just so people understand that it's an important area, but the town isn't coming after your land. So just the way we try to list it in the plan or show it on the maps, we just want to be respectful of people's property. The open space plan would also list all of the active recreation projects that people would like to see. If there are specific projects or programs, so far we've had a lot of people requesting middle school and teen projects, activities for 20 and 30-year-olds, after school, after work programs for adults. A lot of people have mentioned a community center, not just a senior center or a teen center, but a community center where multiple age groups can be using the property at the same time. Just briefly, it's not just about getting public input. There are some technical resources that I would be using in order to come up with recommendations for the open space plan. We just have two here about culvert replacement, which we kind of already talked about with the aquatic habitat management, hunting setbacks. That is an important management tool that we have in town. If you look through a forest and you can see all the way through it, it's not a very healthy forest. And that is mostly because deer are over-browsing all of our native plants and they're leaving behind the invasive species. Just one example. So if we are looking to preserve land, we want to make sure that they're in the dark green area, not within the hatched area. Just this way there's more area available for hunting. So when we take everyone's comments and their suggestions, we come up with a set of goals and objectives for the plan. So if one of our goals was to protect water resources, we would come up with these examples of objectives and then some actions that would go behind it. These are just two examples of that. And our next steps are to finish with the public, public input portion of that, the open space survey is still going on. We have 245 responses so far, which I think is really good. That's going to be open probably for close to another month. I'm doing open space presentations at Frothingham Hall on the 16th from 6 to 7 p.m. and on the 23rd during the day from 10 to 11. And I'm also at the planning board meeting, and that would conclude the public input gathering portion of that. When I have a draft plan that would come back before you and the planning board and a public meeting, so that we can get public support for the projects. It requires an official vote from the select board and the planning board that they support the open space plan. And then that goes to the Division of Conservation Services, where they inevitably come up with another 2 pages of things they would like us to change. It's a pretty long plan. It's about 200 to 300 pages. There's a lot of information that goes into it. We're actually working with Division of Conservation Services to maybe shorten some of that, so it's a little bit more relevant and more concise, so that people will actually read it. But so far, we've gotten great comments, and we hope to continue to get some more.
Well, I think that starting with the action plan, reading that first, and then when you have questions in that, go back and find the chapter in the big book, so to speak, is probably an easier way to address that if people are trying to look at it at home. Any comments, questions, Mark?
So I have a question on the input. I know you're receiving input, and it sounds like that's in a lot of public forums.
Yes.
Is there any other means for people to provide input that is not in person or in a public forum? Like, do you send out anything online or questionnaires or?
Yeah, the online survey is in 5 different languages. Worked with the schools, and they let us know which 5 languages would be most appropriate through the Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Plan project that we've also been working on. The survey was posted in the Crier on multiple dates. I also printed and laminated flyers with the QR code for the survey and posted that at trailheads, where people are
Great idea.
actively using property. Parks and Recreation, they also posted it on their property. It's at the library, the YMCA.
It's on the
Fernandes
front of a
Lumber, the post
website.
office. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
it's on the front of a town website. It's been on our social
Wanted
media.
to
Banner on the
participate in this?
website.
Did
Yeah.
you go to the town website as well?
Yes,
Yep.
right on the front of the
Great.
town website too, and
Yep.
it's been
Lots
the,
of different groups included it in their regular mailings, special emails. The schools sent it out as well on
Excellent.
Facebook. And
through Parent Square.
Fantastic.
trying to get as many
Yeah.
different ways as possible.
Absolutely. And it sounds like you are.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. Is there anything in particular a select board would love to see in an open space plan?
You
It is
didn't-
good for 7 years, and like I said, it's kind of your wish list, and as funding or things become available, that's when you tackle the project.
Right.
It's not like if it's in the open space plan, you have to do it. So I don't know if there were projects that people were looking forward to.
You didn't mention accessibility, so how does that fold into what you're doing?
Yeah, a number of people, including myself, had listed projects for better accessibility, not just physically, but also improved wayfinding, improved mapping. We have to do a Section 504 report included with the open space plan, where we go to each conservation and park property, fill out an evaluation, and then try to come up with ways to improve accessibility. It's definitely something on our minds, so it's good that you pointed that out.
The reason that I was thinking about that also is I know that the OSRPs that I've seen have those, but also we have a very robust Commission on Disabilities, and
Yes.
if you are going out to do the audits for those, if you want to reach out to them, someone may want to go with you,
Yes.
Which is very helpful
Yep.
when you're doing those.
Yep. We did that when I first started here. We did a round of inspections with representatives from DPW and Council on Disabilities.
Okay.
Their meeting, they didn't have a quorum, so I wasn't able to speak at one of their meetings. So hopefully they can attend one of the other public meetings.
Right, okay.
Do you need other volunteers to help you with this project, or are you pretty well set with who you?
I think at this point, I'm really buttoning it down
Yeah.
and coming to the end of the evaluation and all of their writing. Yeah, but thank you.
Okay.
But we can always share it with our friends and
Yes.
remind people
Yes.
to fill out the survey.
Yeah, it'd be great to have lots of people fill out the survey, and then when the draft is available, that's available for public comment as well. And I would love to get comments on that.
All right, great. Great presentation.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank
thanks.
you.
Do you want me to shut this down?
You just close it, yeah.
Just close it?
Yeah.
Then I'm just gonna take my-
Thank you for being
Okay,
here tonight.
thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much, Jen.
All right, next we have Town Administrator update on promoting a sustainable Easton, PASE. We just had an open house, and to also talk about the fiscal '26 budget outlook.
You want to do that first, or do you want to do that?
Did I skip one?
We did. We skipped item 9.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Kind of a big one,
I
too.
went right over that, yeah. Backing up a little bit, discussion and possible vote for intermunicipal agreement between the Town of Easton and the City of Brockton for regional wastewater treatment capacity for the Easton Industrial Park.
Sure. Thank you, Dottie. I am pretty excited to be able to talk about this with the board tonight. I have Joe Shea, who is an engineering consultant we've worked with before from Granite City Partners here, as well as Director Field, in the event there's any technical questions about some of the materials that you've had a weekend to look at and you have in front of you. You have hard copies of the 2-page summary letter because these things can get pretty weedy. But in front of you tonight is a IMA between the Town of Easton and the City of Brockton for, as you said, Dottie, regional wastewater treatment capacity for the Easton Industrial Park. So as the board is aware, the town has identified potential regional wastewater treatment solutions for the industrial park via collaboration with the City of Brockton and numerous strategic and policy planning documents going back multiple decades. Jen's presentation talking about the importance of these multi-year plans, even on our current website, without even going and digging through any kind of boxes, you can very easily go back and find comprehensive wastewater management plan drafts from the early 2000s, more than 20 years ago, identifying this as a priority number 1 for the Town of Easton before we built any sewer, as far as if we could wave our hand and make it happen overnight, that from an economic development perspective, this was priority number 1 of those early plans. That was reiterated and corroborated and bolstered in a variety of other planning documents and reports and studies that were performed by numerous boards, administrations, engineers over the 20 years between then and now. That includes the town's comprehensive wastewater management plan, the economic development self-assessment test that we did more than a decade ago now, I believe, with Northeastern, the industrial park study itself, as well as the Envision Easton master plan that, again, kind of dating it, we're now doing an update to that plan to check in on where we are with our progress. Many of those reports were authored between 2000 and 2015. They cited regionalization as a key opportunity for the provision of sewer, as the economy of scale in larger collaborations like that is substantially more cost effective and just achieves a much more economical project than we can ever hope to do locally. That perspective on regionalization of infrastructure and government services was true then. It's doubly or triply so now with how strained operating budgets are. So I'm very happy that this is in front of you. It's a proposed intermunicipal agreement between Easton and Brockton, which, if executed by both parties, would make that opportunity that Easton has so long sought possible. I want to give credit to Mayor Sullivan and his administration and Commissioner Hill and folks in the City of Brockton who've been working on this with us. I think a few important things to note. There's a letter of support from the mayor in the packet indicating his intent, should the board execute this, to support this with the city council. It would need to go to the Brockton City Council to be fully executed. There's a summary memo, just a few high points I want to hit on here. And for anyone tuning in and says, wow, this sounds like a kind of big deal and not with a ton of fanfare, but they would be correct. But this isn't kind of falling out of the sky. That comprehensive wastewater management plan, one of the many kind of work products that came out of that was the identification of 5 what are called sewer needs areas, which really rolls off the tongue. And those go before voters, and they did in 2010 in Easton to adopt, basically saying we as a community through our engineering and our economic analysis and working with, I think, DEP, to do a variety of environmental impact reports, identify these general areas as in need of sewer from either environmental and septic related, economic, or both purposes. And so all of those were adopted in kind of an aspirational posture back in 2010, although the size of the 5 needs areas collectively is so large, the likelihood, at least in my tenure, that we're doing all that is close to none. It still lays out a roadmap for where sewer makes the most sense. And so from there, we then, of course, built the Northeastern Village sewer. We built the sewer on 138, sewer on Foundry Street, which itself was done through an intermunicipal agreement and a collaborative effort with Mansfield. And all the while, though, Industrial Park has been contained in a needs area, and there just hasn't yet been the opportunity for that regional solution. But I think that's important anytime anything like this is happening. That's now 15 years ago that was adopted, but it was adopted by our voters at town meeting. So, again, obligatory note that this has been reviewed thoroughly by our legal counsel, by our public works and engineers, and the same for the city. And the high-level items here for the board's benefit and consideration, this does not create any immediate financial obligation to the town. If you read into the agreement, it's a 25-year term commencing. It says from January 1st. It would, again, need to be executed by the council. There is an important 3-year clock baked in there, which makes sense that Easton is not obligated by a date certain to have a sewer system constructed because, again, this has been a priority for so long, but what we have not, I think, wanted to do is lay out the funds to do a full-scale design, because that in and of itself can be quite costly, unless we have good reason, like a letter from the mayor, to say this is real. So we need to design the sewer, we need to put a finance portfolio together, we need to build the sewer, so that takes years. There's a 36-month clock in there that says, should Easton not go through design and seek construction appropriations, which is not the same thing as actually, assessing betterments and things, although we would have an idea of what those were, then the city reserves the right to renegotiate the financial terms in good faith, which makes sense because the city, although they have much larger treatment plants than we do, if they were to sign a 25-year agreement without a clock like that in there, then theoretically Easton could sit on it for 23 years. And that's treatment that they perhaps could have other folks in need of, although they have capacity today, 20 years from now they may not if we don't kind of get in there and start sending flow. 80,000 gallons per day of initial treatment capacity would be made available to Easton at the Brockton Treatment Facility. It can request more capacity in 20,000 gallon per day increments as necessary as the park develops out. 80,000 is a comfortable amount of headroom. I'll put Dave and Joe on the spot. I think the actual water consumption is somewhere in the 30s.
That is correct. And
yes.
More than twice the water consumption you have today.
Right.
Which is completely the goal, to make your industrial park expand and perform more economically.
Capacity purchase payable to the city would be 960,000, which is payable upon full construction, connection, and the transmittal of flow from the sewer collection system that Easton will design and construct. But the payment, as far as the capacity purchase, so to speak, would trigger only once we've actually built the sewer system, which is advantageous. We would pay an ongoing sewer use fee to the city proportionate to what our flow represents as far as the total flow the city treats. They divide it out. Say it costs $100 to run the plant. I think it's slightly more than that in real life, and we use 1%. They'll bill us $1, if that makes sense. DPW has crunched those numbers. Our sewer rate is quite high because we don't have economies of scale like a 20 million gallon per day plant. We have very small boutique plants. Those are expensive to run. We have the capacity comfortably within our revenue, so we would bill the folks for the sewer use, for the actual flow. We would use that revenue to pay those O&M costs to the city, which is similar to what we do with Mansfield. Let's see what else. If not unlike a betterment, if there were a future capital improvement to that regional treatment plant, just as if we were 1% of the flow, we would be assessed 1% of that capital obligation, which again we think is appropriate and fair. We also understand the terms to be commensurate and comparable with the IMAs that the city of Brockton has with other neighboring communities. So again, I'm excited about this. I don't want to oversell it because there's a lot of work in front of us. But this is something that Easton, going back to at least the early 2000s, if not sooner or later, I'm thinking in reverse here, has been working towards and prioritizing. It does still need to go before the council. And of course, we'll work collaboratively with them. And we are very appreciative to the mayor and the council for considering this because this could be a really big opportunity, not just for the industrial park and for Easton, but also for the city and for the region, the folks who live here and people who work there. So it sets a really important foundation. We have a team here that I think is quite capable and ready to take a challenge like this on. We have worked on and built 3 sewer districts together now in the past 13 years. That doesn't mean there won't be challenges. And let me be clear, the price of constructing a sewer collection system is much higher now than it was, and that'll be a real challenge. But this is something that has been not just something Easton has hoped for, but Old Colony Planning Council, the Metro South Chamber of Commerce. So we will work hard with our partners to, as we've done in all these other sewer construction projects, to line up grants and bring in other revenue opportunities to make this pencil and make it happen. So I am recommending to the board and asking that you execute this tonight so we can transmit it to the city council. But of course, would not expect you to do so without questions or follow-up. So Joe, myself, and Dave are here if you have questions.
Awesome. Mark?
This is super exciting. We've never made it this far. This is something that we've wanted for decades. I think I've brought it up a number of times, and I obviously am incredibly supportive. Just a couple questions on how this can come to fruition, because we're not there yet by any stretch.
No.
So their council, just so I'm clear, their council needs to approve it.
Correct.
Right? So it goes to their council, then they approve it. Mm-hmm. And then then we go to a design where we design it and say, is this affordable to us? Like, does this make sense?
Yep.
Right?
Yes.
And then at that point, does it come back to the board to say, this is the cost, this is what the cost will be? Do you guys support this? And then is it a vote to get to the next step?
Roughly, yes. So Joe, correct me if I'm wrong on any of this, but yes, so you have that mostly right. This is the foundation that we need to start building. From here, we will work together to start kind of schematic phase. We'll probably lean on some grant or gift funds to get that moving so that we have a appropriately confident estimate for design phase funding. My goal would be by town meeting this May. And so that would be a capital item. We would get that moving. And part of design is not just designing the actual, from a civil engineering perspective, but it's the financial design. Mm-hmm. What do we think the cost is? What does that look like if it's funded entirely through betterments? What does that look like if it's funded through a mixture of betterments and town's general capital capacity? And as you probably all recall from some pretty tough meetings in this room in Frothingham, usually we start at a very conservative contingency budget. That is a pretty scary construction number, and we don't assume any grant receipts. And so those betterment numbers, when we do it right, start higher, and we work really hard and bring those down over the years. As far as votes, town meeting would need to vote to appropriate the funding to get design moving on this spring. That's, you don't want to take something like that as a given. Obviously, the economics are very tough right now for the town's operating budget. Mm-hmm. But, and we'll talk more about this on the PACE item, but as I think the discussions with PACE, just the feedback we got from our residents at the open house last week, I think folks recognize the huge opportunity that infrastructure investments represent, not just for those parcels that may be able to improve, but for the town's long-term financial sustainability. So I'm certainly not going to take that for granted, but I think that this is a approach we've used before and that has paid great dividends for Easton, downtown, 138, and Five Corners. So we would need to have town meeting vote funding for design, unless we receive some huge grant in between now and then, and I'll try my best, but I won't make any promises. We go through design, we do the civil aspect, permitting, budget, come up with a kind of financial portfolio, and then yes, it would come back before the board as part of a town meeting warrant review process. It would have to go through a construction phase budget appropriation that would need to go through all the normal procedural, I don't want to say hurdles, but the process to be on a warrant, go select board finance committee, and go to town meeting, who would have the final say on authorizing the outlay for the construction costs.
Okay. Another question. So is there, City of Brockton, their council votes, and let's say they approve it, right? Is there something that I'm not seeing or a mechanism built in somewhere where I just don't know, where they can pull it back at any point, or are they now committed to it after their vote?
The way that it's written, if you take your action on your timeline, they are committed to giving you this.
Okay. So we wouldn't be, halfway through a design phase and have hired a designer, or Dave has spent his valuable time, and there's no mechanism for them to say, we had second thoughts. Like if a new mayor comes in, I'm just trying to protect the finances of the town.
Sure.
Should what we not want to happen.
Those are good questions. I'll give a caveat that I'm not an attorney, but this is consistent with the types of language we would see in an IMA, and to the extent the city has a provision to claw something back, it's not the agreement in its entirety. It's that 36-month clock I referenced, right? So this is an agreement that goes through 2049, but the exact language is in the event that Easton fails to appropriate sufficient funds for construction of a project within 36 months of the effective date, or prior to expiration of the term of this agreement, which is 2049, whichever is earlier, the parties will work in good faith to renegotiate the terms of the agreement in order to continue providing the wastewater services included hereunder. So although it would reopen the agreement as far as the particulars, probably the finances, I would imagine, it's clear that the intent is to still make sure to ensure that the provision of those wastewater treatment services by the city of Easton would remain available.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
Good question.
Sure, thank you.
Is it your estimate that we will be able to have enough design ideas to go before the May of the town meeting?
Not for construction, no, but we're at a pre-schematic phase right now, so we would need to get, you all know my style, I like to have things not half-baked before I go before you, and especially before the voters, so we want to have a degree of confidence of if we ask for an investment on the design development phase, that it's an accurate number to take us from where we are through the development of bid-ready documents so that we're not having to come back to town meeting repeatedly. So that, I think, and I guess I'll put the two engineers in the spot, I think just doing that between now and May is not an insignificant task.
That's why I was asking the question about whether that was...
Is aggressive, can be done, given the 15 years of prep work that's been put in place. Going for design money, whether it's complete design and bid documents or substantial design, will prepare you best for solid construction estimates, for discussions with your industrial park constituents.
Right.
Opportunities that this would open for them. If they get to remove their very large septic system, could they double production? A company like IBC, could it build a bigger building and continue to produce more revenue for Easton? Getting a solid design done then opens up a window that while you're preparing for construction, you've got the tools you need for state grants, discussions with your industrial park constituents, all of those items to come back for a final construction approval, hopefully offset by economic development grants, gifts, maybe a new industry that wishes to come to town would buy in advance, those types of activities.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I think that some of the, I appreciate the mayor for looking into this. I know that he has spent a couple of years trying to dig into this. The Metro South Chamber did a water and sewer study to help that along. And OCPC's done some studies as well and participated in that one. Having a regional wastewater facility opens the door to a number of other bigger grants, which helps the city as well.
That's right.
And the capital improvements, if you have your own sewer system and you're not sharing some of that burden with the communities around you, when it comes time for capital improvements, it's all on them. So I think that, if we were to build our own, we would have some of that liability as well. We'll share a liability in it. But I think it's really smart for them to be looking at bringing on, more partners to help alleviate some of those costs as well. So very excited to move forward on this. This is the second mayor that I've worked with through this process, and I know that this has gone on since before I was on the board too. So I think it's a win-win. I think it's good for Brockton. It's good for Easton. It's good for the employees and the businesses in the park, especially if they can expand. We've lost a couple of big tenants in the park recently because there wasn't enough area for them to expand. So this will be really a great benefit. So
I think a couple of the board members hit on a point I do want to make, that this has been being worked on and off for many, many, many years. And so there will certainly be some folks in the industrial park who are surprised to see this. And I think it's important to reiterate that this doesn't mean it's getting built tomorrow and they're getting a betterment, right? Because when you have those conversations with those business owners on what would sewer do for your capacity, there's a lot, understandably, from a business perspective of it could do a lot, but it also depends on what it costs, right? And you get into this kind of chicken and egg situation where we can't really have a really intelligent conversation with our property owners, with those business tenants, until we start to move forward with design. And we couldn't, in my professional estimate at least, the design will be substantial enough at competing with other things like replacing vehicles or fire trucks. We did not want to do kind of speculatively in at risk. So we're at a point where there may be some folks who call some of you and say, I didn't even know this was happening. But it's not going to happen tomorrow. This is a step we do need to take to get this moving so that we can bring folks in and really get those more personalized understandings of what does this mean for your property, what is the order of magnitude we're looking at when it comes to betterments, what are the grant opportunities. And as we all know from kind of aggressively going after grants for many, many, many years, your ability to win those grants, especially larger grants, is very close to nothing if you aren't meaningfully into design and you could show that you have a real plan and a team, right? Because the state's not going to lay out millions of dollars for infrastructure if we say, well, we'd like to do it. They want to see that we're moving.
And the more sewer infrastructure that we can activate, the better it is for our environment. And we're, spending all this time and energy and money on climate action plans and municipal vulnerability and open space recreation. And these all kind of complement each other. So,
yes.
Well, fingers crossed for the council. If you're watching, we hope to see you vote positively on this.
Yes. Yes, and we'll transmit it to the city with a cover letter of appreciation from the board, assuming you execute.
So, Craig, is there a written motion in there? Or?
No, there isn't, but I can move to approve the plan for sewer, the IM, what's it called?
It's the intermunicipal agreement between, the agenda item language would suffice. It's an intermunicipal agreement between the Town of Easton and the City of Brockton for regional wastewater treatment capacity.
Sounds like a reasonable motion.
So you could.
Moved.
Yep, there you go.
So that's Bodger and Lamb, all in favor? Unanimous.
Excellent.
So are you signing that, or do we need to authorize you to sign it, or am I signing it?
We have a printed IMA that you will sign tonight,
Okay,
and then
we'll
we
sign
will
it.
pull together a nice letter, and we'll get the signatures.
Terrific.
Great.
Excellent.
Thank
Very
you all.
exciting.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
You've been here for the whole duration. You must be excited too.
2010, it's been a long, great road. It really
Yep.
has.
Very
And
exciting.
David?
Congratulations.
Thank you,
Didn't have
Joe.
enough big projects to do lately.
Our Dan's card was feeling empty.
I was just thinking, you haven't even gotten a breather from the
Oh,
last
no.
project. But
We do.
that's what you
That
do.
is what we do.
You better not go
Public Works
anywhere,
makes it happen. All right, on to the next is the town administrator update now on promoting a sustainable Easton pace, the open house, and the fiscal year 2026 budget outlook.
Sure, thank you, Dottie. So as a board, I think it's very well aware Dottie, as chair of the board, is on promoting a sustainable Easton. Other members have joined some of the meetings, come to the open houses, and certainly followed along as PACE has done its work. not to be a rain cloud on the positive news we just had, but we have a hard year in front of us, which in my view reinforces the necessity of continuing to go after regional things like this to position us for success in the future. But fiscal 26, as the board knows, will be a difficult year for Easton and for the Easton Public Schools, and for conditions we understand, right? So it was following years of high inflation and 2 decades now of minimal funding from the state for education and public services. We are reaching a point where even by leveraging our reserves that we have also built up over time, next fiscal year is very likely to cut education and public service levels in our community. Voters, to their credit, showed a lot of concern with this trend and trajectory at the town meeting last May. There was a budget amendment that created, although it was not named at that time, created what went on to be PACE, which has folks from town, schools, has employees, members from a teachers union, has a lot of citizen volunteers, many of whom are first-time board volunteers, so they picked the hardest possible committee they could have to get involved in their community. And we've been working quite hard, in credit to that team of volunteers, this 19-member committee, since the summer when the select board and the school committee appointed it. And so recognizing the tough year we have coming, PACE has kind of a 2-part job. They finished the first part, which is getting our arms around collectively what is the problem and roughly what is the size of this problem. And they came and reported that out to the select board, the school committee in December. And one of the things that the committee felt was important, because these meetings are average between 4 and 5 hours long and are very kind of in the weeds, was we recognized that that is not a forum, although it's a public meeting, that's not a forum that's conducive to folks participating. And so we put on a informational open house that I want to credit our staff here and also folks at the schools and the library and everyone on PACE for helping us pull the logistics together. We put on an open house at the Queesit House last week, which is not something you typically do for budgets. We took the idea of basically a planning charrette, more like what you would see for an open space plan, and said, well, let's do that with the budget. And we broke out rooms based on subject areas, taxation and town government, Easton Public Schools, police, fire, public works. There was an overview room, and invited folks to come in and either do a sit-down presentation of the high-level overview, gave them a 1-page handout of what's going on, or if you want, you can just go room to room and talk to folks, talk to the police chief about what the budget position means to the police department, talk to the superintendent about school operations, come talk to me about taxes and Prop 2.5. Or if you want to speak to a neighbor who's volunteering in the committee, speak with them. And so I'm really, really pleased. Although we have our work cut out for us, we have a hard year coming. It was really edifying. I know for myself, everyone on the committee, there was really great turnout. We were hoping that if there was going to be a problem, it would be that parking was really too tight, and not that it was us standing together, looking at each other with no one from the community. And so I think somewhere in the ballpark of 70-ish people came. We had 75 programs printed. There was almost none left. That's assuming every single person took one. Got pretty tight in there. That's a small building. But the turnout was really good. We have kind of hard choices to make as a community, but people were civil. They were engaged. And it was a great event. I'm very proud of everyone who volunteers on PACE for their work there. I don't know, Dottie, I think everyone here went. Before I talk about where we're going after this, we focus on some of the positives of the open house if you'd like, but I appreciate seeing all of you there. Dottie's on the committee, but it certainly doesn't get us to where we need to be for town meeting in May as far as what are the choices we have. PACE has to really start refining what they're going to recommend to the select board and the school committee in the next 6 to 8 weeks or so. They have to have a written report by the end of March. But it was really encouraging to see that many folks from our community, some folks who are at a lot of public meetings and events and a lot of our boards, and some folks we've never seen before, which is really good, coming in to understand where the town is, why we have these challenges, and what our options are in both the immediate term and the long term for trying to work on some of these things. So,
do you have any comments or questions?
It was a great event. You guys did a fantastic job putting it on. I didn't expect the layout that you had. That was brilliant. I was expecting to go in and be shuffled into a room and, you know, that you're just spoken to.
Here's a slide deck.
It was not like that at all. You know, and there was a lot of faces I've seen before, but a lot of new faces, and those are the faces that I want there. There were people who went there that they had questions, and they had challenging questions, and you know, they didn't understand why things are the way they are, and you know, they could come at you, so to speak, right? I want those people there. Right. Those are the people that I want to talk to. I want to understand their perspective and share what it is that I know. And there were a lot of those people there. So in my estimation, that is and a lot of other things, is what made it such a successful event.
Sure.
So
Thank you.
Thank you to everybody who participated in putting it on. You did a fantastic job.
Craig?
Yeah, I talked with both the chairs of the committee, Nancy and Tom, and they were very pleased with the turnout. They were very pleased with the kinds of questions people had. They were pleased that it was very civil, and that yes, there were some hard questions, and there were some hard. The need to respond was difficult. In talking to the chief, the police chief, he had the same kind of feeling that people were genuinely interested in what's going on and why it's going on and what kind of solutions there are. Nancy Dunning said there were some suggestions they hadn't thought about that they put on the whiteboard. I couldn't get in there because it was so packed.
Yeah, so standing room only.
Yeah. So, but I was pleased, and as Mark said, there were people that I knew, and there were a lot of people there that I had never met before, which was kind of exciting to see that. I'm trying to figure out if there's a way to do something like that between now and the 6 or 8 weeks, so we can get even more people engaged.
So PACE is meeting again Wednesday, and one of their items is making that kind of decision on, do we, as PACE reaches the point of having draft recommendations, have a follow-up or successor open house to bring people in and said, we heard from you, we've met with all the departments kind of exhaustively, we've read thousands of pages of budgets, this is what we're thinking, give it kind of like having I borrowed heavily from the planning field, as you could tell, having a draft plan and so we'll have to figure something like that out, probably need to have a bigger venue, which again is a really awesome problem to have. But yes, I think, I can't speak for the committee, obviously, but that's Wednesday night that we'll be thinking about those things. Because we want to keep people engaged. Because this is going to be a very hard town meeting.
No, there's no question about it. No question about it.
So if you asked me last week during the day, it was one of the most freezing cold nights that we had. And
Yeah,
I
it was
thought
like
maybe,
10 degrees.
Maybe 5 people would show
Huge
up.
credit to everyone
I would have
who
lost
walked.
the bet because there were a lot of people, a lot of, like everyone's saying, a lot of new faces. I had the opportunity, I was posted in the room with the schools, and a lot of people were asking me questions about how things related between the schools and the towns, and some really interesting questions. I marveled at how polite people were. I could sense frustration in a lot of the questions. And I understand that, but everybody was very respectful, very grateful that we took the time, not just, the people that were on the committee, but the chiefs. A lot of people commented they couldn't believe David, Greg, Swan, people from DPW, police, fire were there to answer questions for people, like really, how many people get the opportunity to do that? So there was supposed to be 2 presentations upstairs in the room that were supposed to be like 15, 20 minutes.
Right.
And the first one was, I think, an hour, maybe a little bit longer.
There's a lot of active participation.
Yeah, people wanted to stay and ask more questions. So, that there's definitely an appetite for more information and to share information. So, Tom and Nancy did a wonderful job.
Awesome job.
Everyone on the committee, we meet almost every other week since summer for these 4 to 5 hours. We're not exaggerating. It's a heavy lift. And it's a lot of work. There's homework. There's a lot of reading material. So, the people, and nobody quit. Nobody's quit yet. So.
Yeah, that's remarkable. And the attendance rate's extremely high. The board knows better than anyone. You appoint people to many, many, many committees, and you're sometimes, I won't speak fully for you, correct me if I'm wrong, but you're sometimes nervous when the committee numbers start being double digits, because when you have that many people, it's harder to always to necessarily get quorum. And I would say, we're usually averaging no more than 1 or 2 out of 19 who are not there.
Yeah.
People have put in a ton of work on that committee.
Yeah, and I think it seems rewarding to people, and there's still there's an element of challenge. We are pressure testing our ideas amongst each other and, trying to hear all perspectives, so.
Hey,
So
go
You
ahead.
can get to the second part of it.
Well, the second part of it was largely what I think in all of our different ways in our different rooms people were discussing. A lot of people very shortly after understanding like, okay, this is a pretty neat way to have this conversation, very quickly they got to like, okay, so what does May 19th look like at this town meeting and what does the budget look like? So typically I issue a preliminary budget at the end of February, and myself and Dr. Cabral, when we spoke about it, recognize that that's just going to be too late this year with the amount of we feel pretty strongly if we're reaching out to the community and saying we want you engaged sooner, that we also need to have concrete things for them to work with sooner, right? So just to put some numbers out there, PACE, one of the assignments that committee was given was, okay, we identify and agree that there's a problem and that there's a fundamental gap between our recurring revenue and our expenses, right? It doesn't mean every single person agrees that it's entirely a revenue side issue or entirely expense side, but that there is a gap. And the ballpark number that folks landed on was about 4.7 million. And while I will have my normal formalities, I'll have a presentation, I'll have a budget memo and spreadsheets and all that fun stuff for the select board in 2 weeks, what I wanted to use the opportunity tonight to, I suppose, corroborate that committee's work, and that was looking at the current year, fiscal 25, is to kind of show my hand, so to speak, and because I'm going to have this conversation again with PACE Wednesday night, that and we're still reviewing it, so as much as someone could say don't quote me with a microphone on their lapel, this is subject to some change as we refine it. But pre-fiscal 25, the town's preliminary budget process, we always start out with a preliminary deficit because our revenue estimates are at their most conservative earlier on because we have the fewest quarters of actual collections and we have the least information from the state on what they're going to plan to pass to the town. So those are necessarily at their most conservative. And typically the departmental expenditures, to say most generous would be misleading because as Director Field can attest to, they're instructed usually send a level service budget. If you have substantial amounts of unmet operating needs like Public Works does, you can itemize those in a side letter, but there's no chance that's going to get funded this year. So show level service, which is take today's staff level that's funded, the contracts and services we need to purchase for supplies, what does that look like next year with existing contractual obligations and market data? And then we whittle that down because for many years now we've been in a position where we cannot, with our recurring revenue growth, sustain even those level service budgets without doing things like we did last year, like doing 10% across the board expense cuts, like reducing training in police and fire, like dropping a position out of a police department. So we have to whittle away at that. So when you start, you do have a gap. Under the law, we have to balance it. And we do by the time we get to town meeting. Up until fiscal 25, preliminary budget deficits, those gaps, usually were in the ballpark of 1 to 2 million. In the years that it was closer to 1 million, you still had some work to do, but that was, and for perspective, our budgets, you can ballpark 100 million. A $1 million deficit year, that was a couple of iterations and you got to balance. $2 million year was a bit tougher. Last year, for fiscal 25, the preliminary deficit was 3.3 million. Right now, our working estimate is that we're north of 5 million for fiscal 26, which I have not seen in the 14 years I've been here. I don't want to say it's never happened ever in history, but just it's probably unlikely. That's particularly severe for a few reasons. One is that number doesn't yet account for using any stabilization funds. We will use stabilization funds, but we cannot balance that with stabilization funds. I wanted, and when we put this memo out, I'll make sure to be really intentional and highlight that I did not want to assume on the select board, the school committee, and the finance committee's behalf, a certain dollar amount of stabilization funds right out of the gate, because just the nature of how folks consume information, that will get kind of baked into the baseline, and that's going to be the low threshold of what people think is reasonable or not cause for concern, even if it is, right? And it will obfuscate and mask the truth, which is that our recurring revenue growth next year, when you account for the elimination of stabilization funds, the elimination of federal funds, and the application of fewer free cash dollars, is about 1%, which of course is insufficient. That's insufficient before the inflationary environment, and it's certainly insufficient now. So I'm saying this as a kind of long caveat that I'm not trying to hide the ball. We, of course, will need to leverage stabilization funds to some amount, but it needs to be done responsibly, and it cannot close a gap that size. A couple other things I think are worth pointing out here. Looking just in the past 2 years from fiscal 24, going into our preliminary forecast for fiscal 26, and some of this information came in basically over the holiday break, as it typically does. The preliminary healthcare rates from the Group Insurance Commission, that's the state insurance consortium that Easton is a member of, joining the GIC over a decade ago was actually, ironically, in the current climate, in the current context, a good cost-saving measure for us at the time. Our healthcare premiums, which are for school active employees, town active employees, and retirees of both, grew in the ballpark of 3.5-ish% per year, which for healthcare is pretty good. Last year, they went up 10%, and we were told to preliminarily budget up to 12 going into next. So when you look at that from a dollars and cents perspective, right? Remember, we have a roughly $100 million budget. In just 2 years, the town's share of healthcare premiums, if that number shakes out to be even remotely accurate, will have grown by $2 million in 2 years. And that's a fixed cost we have to pay. Yeah. We can't go to the state and say, do better. So that's $2 million. Our pension assessment, so employees pay into their pension, their defined benefit system. And over time, depending on your date of hire, over time they progressively increase how much of your salary has to fund that, because the actuarials are getting better and realize that the decades and decades past, contributions were not sufficient to meet the obligations of these regional systems. And so newer employees are paying closer to 10% of their wages into the pension to offset the future benefit liabilities. That did not used to be the case. And so communities that are in these pension systems have pension payments that are basically catch-up payments to offset those liabilities for the regional system. And in theory, you reach a point, there's a nexus at some beautiful day that's always 6 years away, where the new payroll deductions have been raised sufficiently to actually cover the long-term liabilities of your current workforce, and your catch-up payments have increased enough that you pay your way out of it, so to speak. Those payments have increased by 1 million in 2 years. So just those two items, right? I started as saying our deficits used to be in the ballpark of 1 to 2 million when we started. Now we're 5 plus. I just gave you two single items that we have no control over what they cost that grew 3 million in 2 years. Yeah. Right? So we have some tough choices to make, because what that then means is if we have a deficit that's 5 million plus, out of our budget that's not a fixed cost, a debt payment that must be made, an insurance premium we can't negotiate with the state on, property insurance, just like everyone in their personal lives. They're trying to get better at turning this into something understandable rather than 40-page spreadsheets. You know, at like a pace, we're asking people, what's happened to your home insurance, your health insurance the past 2 years? And it was, oh my God, it's out of control. Like, great, for us too, but we're insuring almost 1 million square feet of buildings, right? And insuring 1,000 roughly active and retiree accounts. And you see people say, oh, okay, I get it. This is going to be tough. Our property, casualty, and liability insurance have gone up closer to 16 to 17% in 2 years. Our operating budgets never go up that much in 2 years because they can't. And so if we have a deficit that's north of 5 million, and that needs to come out of 70 million of town and school operations, that's a tough number. And so what that means when you look at town and school operations, and this came up a lot at PACE, I'm not saying any of this to sow alarm, but just to be transparent for anyone who's watching this who didn't go to the open house, 85 cents approximately of every dollar of operations we spend on both the town and school side goes to salary, which makes sense because we're human service organizations. We provide services through people and through our employees. Most of the next 15 cents is for costs that also are kind of they're not subject to, oh, we don't need that, because it's usually things like utility bills. We can't just not pay for electricity. We've done a lot to cut those costs. We've done a lot of solar, competitive purchase agreements. And we've worked really hard to narrow those where we can, and we've been quite successful. But if we want to meaningfully reduce deficits absent a large increase in revenue, which in the immediate window is an override, that is the only choice. And that's not my personal opinion. Pace spent 40 plus hours on that, and this is just the way our finances are structured in Massachusetts. Absent that, large reductions in expenses mean reductions to operating budgets, and when your operations are 85% people, that means jobs. And so one of the things that it's too early for us to give exact numbers because these are people's livelihoods, and I know people want to know as much as they can as soon as they can, but a lot of this is fluid, right? We don't even have a state budget yet. We have some information to assume it's not going to be great. But if the governor's budget that comes out at the end of this month is better than what I'm baking into my model, then we'll improve that and that'll close the gap, right? And sometimes modest improvements on the state revenue of 14 million can be the swing between a handful of jobs. And so you don't want to come out in January and start giving exact numbers, because there's a delicate balance we have as public fiduciaries with informing the public that there's going to be a tough budget coming without getting over our skis and putting numbers on certain things that our employees watch these meetings, right? I mean, these are very real and for some folks scary things to contemplate. And so without putting a specific number and saying this department will have this number, if the current dynamics hold, what we can expect going into fiscal 26, things that could be at risk, and again, I'm not saying, therefore, all of these things will happen, but these things are certainly at risk, is larger classroom sizes at the schools, reduced athletic and enrichment offerings at the schools, and increased fees for the programs that are still there to offset those costs, reduced public safety staffing, and therefore response capacity, reduced public works staffing and road building and park maintenance capacity, reduced citizen services at places like Town Hall, or Frothingham Hall, with potentially slower permitting, potential for reducing community amenities or programs, and then increasing, to the extent we can, to offset this gap, permit fees and other business fees that we try not to increase because we want to have a fair fee schedule for all of these programs, right? And also because fees and things of that nature are such a small portion of our revenue compared to taxes, which are capped at 2.5% plus new growth, and then state aid, which grows roughly 1% per year. But when we're in a position this severe, we have to be looking at all of those things. And so I plan to be coming to you as a fee-setting body for your permits, and that our departments will be speaking with the other boards in town that have jurisdiction to lay out new fee schedules for many of these permits to try to improve revenue and again close that gap.
So right now, everything's on the table. You know.
Yeah, so I mean, we have our work cut out for us.
Yeah.
And none of it. Some of the questions of the open house were like, well, to me, almost on a personal level, like, well, you must not want that. It's like, no, of course I don't. But I have to put a balanced budget before town meeting, and I will. That doesn't mean I think it will be good for the level, the quality of services in town. It has to be balanced. We can't deficit spend for operations. And so we have our work cut out for us. PACE has their work cut out for us. They're going to start ideating on recommendations Wednesday. And again, I just wanted to, this was the conversation all night last Wednesday. And that was a more informal open house setting. I want to have that with you as a board while on camera, because we'll have the formal preliminary budget issued in 2 weeks. And I think folks, there may be a certain amount of surprise at how serious this is. So.
And where it puts us at risk, I just made a couple of notes. When you mentioned that we've had to cut training for first responders and DPW, I know the schools had to reduce their maintenance on the schools last year as a budget cut. You'd never do that in your own house. It's just not the appropriate thing to do, to not have training for people that, risk their lives for our community. I mean, IT, we've told our department heads to keep their budget level funded every year. And then what happens is we have big projects. Like, we needed a huge IT refresh for years. And you keep kicking it down the road because the IT director's like, I'm doing exactly what you're telling me. I managed to get it, level funded, but you're really just deferring either maintenance or big projects, and it makes it more expensive when you get to it.
That's
and
right.
It puts us at risk when we're going through it, Yeah, I feel particularly sensitive to the IT one because, there's a lot of IT vulnerabilities, cybersecurity threats, things like that we've been able to contract with a company to help with. But in my opinion, it took a long time to get there because we didn't have the funding to do it. And there's never a time,
That's right.
to have the funding to do it. Just like in our own houses, there's never a time to have an unexpected big expense come up. These things hurt all of us. But I honestly, I'm not looking forward to Wednesday. These are awful conversations to have. And when we're talking about, we talked a lot about in the PACE about being respectful. Wherever we're going to be talking about, it's going to be painful. And I think everybody's doing a good job.
Yes, universally, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's on the expense side or on the revenue side.
Right.
If there was an easy way to fix this, we wouldn't be doing this.
Yeah.
We would just fix it, right? And it's not, and this is cold comfort, I think, but this is not an Easton problem or something we caused necessarily. This is happening around the Commonwealth because all of the fixed cost dynamics I just alluded to are very similar in cities and towns around the state. And a huge, huge factor at play here is that Easton, we've all heard Dr. Cabral talk about being a minimum aid district, right? Which means we get only $30 per student of new revenue from the state per year, which equals roughly $100,000 against a $50 million operation, which is 0.25% for folks doing the math. We have been a minimum aid community for over a decade, but we used to be in the minority of school districts in the state. Now, in the past couple of years, last year it was close to 2/3 of school districts have slid into minimum aid as a result of demographic trends, declining enrollments as families struggle to afford to have as many children. And it's not an accident that when you have health premiums and pension assessments going up double-digit %, and then the second largest source of revenue for most cities and towns for hundreds of schools shifting into a sub 1% growth posture at the same time, that there's overrides going on all over the state. It's not because anyone wants to ask that. It's a terrible thing to have to ask your electorate to consider when you're trying to control costs, and it's a hard economic environment. There's been over 20% inflation in 4 years. But those are structural forces at play around the state that in a lot of places are pitting neighbor against neighbor and department against department, and communities really pulling themselves apart. And it's a horrible thing to see. And I think PACE is trying mightily to not do it that way. And we're halfway there, and it's gone well. And we hope what we saw last week continues, because we're going to need folks to come in and be part of that process. Because to your point, there's no clean, simple path forward here to just, fix. These are tough, immediate choices about fiscal 26, and then also some longer term discussions. One of the things relevant to Jen Carlino's presentation tonight was one of the things from a room, and I don't quote me on the wordage because I was standing in the hall because I couldn't fit either. I believe the chair and vice chair asked folks, as an icebreaker, what are some things you love about Easton? And things that rose very quickly to the top of that were open space, green space, environmental protection, parks, et cetera. And then one of the next questions are, what are things that we're not doing well, or things that are hard, or things that we need to improve on? Very quickly, wetlands and zoning jump to the top of that. And the former is in large part thanks to the latter, right? You have open space because there are environmental protections in place that made it so those things couldn't be developed. And to the credit of the folks who went, you could see people saying, oh, okay, that makes a lot of sense, actually. It doesn't mean I don't think anyone's ever going to say, I love permitting, right? Like, we have to do it. But these things are all connected, and these are we have hard choices to make going into the town meeting. And so hopefully we'll have another open house or similar type event. We'll know a lot more from PACE in the coming weeks. The select board and school committee obviously are going to have their budget processes as we get to work. I think we have to open the warrant for town meeting at your next meeting, the 27th. And we'll continue to try to make ways and opportunities for folks to get involved, because this isn't like an accounting problem to fix. These are very kind of core value questions that voters are ultimately going to get their say on.
Yep.
And for anyone following along, if you haven't come into the fold of PACE, we have a dedicated website. It's easton.ma.us/PACE, P-A-S-E. I believe there is also a dedicated PACE Facebook that shares factual information about the town and school's finances. That's facebook.com/PACE committee, P-A-S-E committee. And again, if you go to the PACE website, there's links there that you could sign up for email notices when they meet. You could contact the chairs and vice chair. If you're not, sign up for the town crier, because we relied on that heavily. It also went out through the schools, which I appreciate, through their parent square. So we'll continue to make sure that we're letting folks know in advance when these opportunities to engage with and grapple with these choices are. And again, I will close on a positive note of saying, those challenges are substantial, but that we have people coming in now is a very positive thing. And so thank you to everyone who went to the open house and braved the 5 degrees or whatever it was. And of course, everyone on PACE for all their hours and hours and hours of work at all their meetings and also prepping for that open house. So.
And people can, like you said, people can email the chairs of the PACE, people can email the select board.
That's right.
We don't get any questions about the budget generally. So we would love to hear what people have to say or what they're thinking, or if anyone has an amazing idea that we haven't thought about yet, that would be the best. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Connor.
Good job, Connor. All right, next we have the acceptance of resignation, Norman Hicks from the Committee for Climate Action Planning with a term expiring of June 30th, 2027. We want to thank Mr. Hicks for his time serving on that committee, and we'll need to vote to accept his resignation.
I move to accept Norman Hicks' resignation from the Committee for Climate Action Planning with a term expiring June 30th, 2027.
Second.
So that's Bodger and Lamb, and it's a roll call vote.
Lamb Hicks.
Full Janetti Hicks.
Barger Hicks.
Okay. And again, an acceptance of a resignation, Jennifer Gillibert from the Recreation Committee with a term expiring June 2025. We thank Jennifer for her time serving on that committee as well, and we'll vote to accept her resignation.
I move to accept Jennifer Gillibert's resignation from the Recreation Commission with a term expiring June 30th, 2025.
Second.
So that's Bodger and Lamb with a roll call vote.
Lamb Gillibert.
Full Janetti Gillibert.
Barger Gillibert.
Awesome. All right. Next, we have the acceptance of minutes dated December 16th, 2024.
So moved, Barger.
Second. Lamb.
That's Bodger and Lamb. All in favor? Unanimous. Town administrator notes?
Happy New Year. I spoke enough, I think. I don't have anything prepared, I'm sorry.
Okay. Sean?
I guess I'll give a plug for the MVP 2.0. There's a second survey. There was a survey that was done last fall to understand what vulnerabilities existed in Easton based on resident feedback. That feedback's been taken in by the core team that's been between town staff and other residents and volunteers. And now there's a second survey to rank and prioritize different areas such as transportation, food, and access to other resources. And so it'd be helpful if residents could go and take that survey and help us get additional feedback, which will then be fueled to funding a seed project in the future. So that's available on the homepage of our website, and that's easton.ma.us. You can also, we'll also post it on our social media.
Awesome. Great. Mark, anything?
I do not have any comments.
I do. I want to end on a positive note. 2 Saturdays ago, the Tricentennial had an event at Stonehill College, 1 to 5 in the afternoon. The first event for the 300-year celebration. And many of us on the committee were excited, but a little concerned about what the turnout was going to be like. It was a cold day, it was a windy day, and according to the Stonehill Police Department, there were 2,500 people that showed up.
Wow.
And standing there, talking to Dottie, people were streaming in. And it was not like fits and starts, it was streaming in. And the thing that impressed me the most was the number of young families with young children. There was a line waiting for the bouncy house that went on forever. I know that free events draws people, but the fact that many folks brought their kids and their families to that event was extraordinary. And as Dave Clifton said to me, it tells him that people really care about this town, and they're really excited about the fact that we're at 300 years. So I'm really looking forward to the next fence. But I was blown away by the turnout. I actually went at one point because I wanted to see what the axe throwing was, but it wasn't real axes, so I was relieved to see that. But it was terrific. They had roller skating. I mean, it was great. It was great. So I wanted to end on that very positive note.
Wonderful.
That's great. I almost forgot about that, Craig. Feels like it was a long time ago. And, thank you, Stonehill, for hosting, and for our Council on Aging. Thank goodness they had those little shuttle vans, because another freezing cold day,
right.
even just walking across the parking lot. And it was like a windstorm, super windy.
Yeah.
So everybody just did an amazing job. I think everyone on the committee should be very proud of themselves. And one down, also, connecting to that, the new flags that are going up on the flagpoles all over town, there's quite a buzz about that, celebrating the 300th for the whole year. So thank you to the DPW for being out there in the freezing cold again. I notice a theme here, putting up those banners, and really great partnership with the community on these.
Yeah, and there were a lot of people who were enthusiastic because they thought, well, maybe it means people slow down when they're driving because they want to see what those signs say. So I thought that was pretty cool observation as well.
Traffic calming measure.
Yeah. We were also able to go to the ribbon cutting for the new pickleball,
It's too much stuff to keep up with.
which was another extraordinary
the place
thing.
is amazing.
It's a huge building. It's a beautiful building. And when I walked in, every single court, 8 courts were full, and there were people waiting. And in talking to folks who run the thing, 7 a.m. to 11 p.m., it doesn't stop. So that's another exciting thing that's going on in town.
That's great.
Not that I'm going to play pickleball, but when I like to go.
You could.
We could have a select board pickleball team.
Right.
That'd be a good fundraiser.
Not with the cost of insurance going up. All right, well, thank you, everybody. Looking forward to another exciting new year, 2025. And thanks for everybody that was here tonight and watching. And a special thanks to ECAT for doing such a great job for us all the time. So with that, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So move, Barger.
Second.
That's Bodger and Lim, all in favor. Unanimous. Have a great couple of weeks, everyone.